All right, so you've sent over a ton of material about Haifa in Israeli cinema, research papers, analyses, even a teacher's guide.
Oh,
Someone has definitely been doing their homework.
It's a fascinating topic.
It is. So our mission, if we choose to accept it, is to see how Haifa becomes a character in these films.
Yeah, beyond the pretty pictures.
Exactly how it becomes a reflection of Israel itself through film.
And how those portrayals have changed over time.
Yeah.
Haifa's film debut was actually all the way back in 1911.
Wow.
A British-Jewish filmmaker named Murray Rosenberg. He captured the city and its bustling port, and it really marked the beginning of Haifa's cinematic journey.
1911, that's before Israel was even a state.
It is.
I'm guessing those early films look pretty different from what we see today.
Oh, definitely. Back then, it was more about showcasing Haifa's landscapes. Almost like a visual tourism brochure.
Right.
Yaakov Bendov's films, for example, from the 1910s and 20s.
Okay.
Those were actually commissioned by Karen Haysad specifically to promote tourism.
So even in those early days, they were using film to present a certain image of the land.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because then things get really interesting in the late 1990s.
Okay.
Israeli cinema experiences this huge resurgence.
Right.
Partly thanks to government funding and support. And we start to see a whole new wave of films set in Haifa.
Okay.
And these films go beyond just pretty scenery. They actually use Haifa as a lens to explore complex social and cultural themes.
Okay, so this idea of representative periphery, this is where things get really interesting for me.
Right.
You're saying Haifa becomes like this microcosm of Israeli society.
Exactly.
A place where we see the national experience playing out on a smaller scale.
Think of it this way. Haifa has this incredibly diverse population.
Right.
Jews, Arabs, immigrants, secular religious communities all living side by side.
Yeah.
And geographically, you have everything from bustling port cities to quiet mountain villages, all within a relatively small area.
Wow.
And this diversity makes it a perfect setting for stories that explore the tensions and complexities of Israeli life.
So filmmakers are using Haifa to reflect the multifaceted nature of Israeli society instead of focusing on Tel Aviv or Jerusalem.
Precisely. It's not just about what happens in Haifa,
Right.
but what those stories tell us about Israel as a whole.
Okay, now we can't talk about Haifa without talking about the port, right?
Of course.
It's such a prominent feature of the city.
Yes.
And it pops up in so many of these films, but you mentioned that it's not always portrayed in a positive light.
That's right. A lot of the research papers you provided point to this.
Really?
It's often depicted as physically and narratively disconnected from the city itself, almost like a separate entity.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought of it that way. What kind of symbolism do you see in that?
Well, it can symbolize borders and isolation,
Mm-hmm.
or even a sense of detachment. In some films, it represents the darker underbelly of society, a place where crime and poverty thrive. You see this in films like Junction 48, where the port is a setting for conflict and emotional baggage, and Time was where the lower city and the port represent a gritty, marginalized world in contrast to the affluent Carmel neighborhoods.
But not every film paints the port in such a bleak light, right? You mentioned Going Up as a counterexample where the port has a more positive role.
Right. And Going Up the Port is a place of action and a symbol of hope for the protagonist.
Okay.
This highlights how filmmakers use the port in different ways to shape their narratives and reflect the complexities of the city and its people.
So it seems like a single location can hold a lot of different meanings. But moving beyond the port, you mentioned how Haifa's unique geography plays a big role in these films.
Yeah.
What's the connection between location and storytelling?
Well, Haifa's landscapes, they offer filmmakers a visual language to amplify their narratives. For example, you have the hilly terrain, the dramatic coastline, the mix of urban and natural environments.
Yeah.
All of these elements can be used to create specific moods and atmospheres. Take Broken Wings, for instance.
Oh, okay.
It uses Haifa's landscape to create a sense of confinement and claustrophobia,
Yeah.
mirroring the family's emotional struggles.
And I remember reading about how Time utilizes the stark contrast between Haifa's lower city and the affluent Carmel neighborhoods.
Right.
That visual divide really reinforces the themes of social and economic inequality.
Exactly.
So it's not just about telling a story, it's
Right.
about showing it through the environment.
In some directors, they take this even further, and they play with the viewer's perception of space.
Oh, really?
They use a technique called the illusion of false orientation,
Okay.
where familiar locations are presented in a way that disorients the audience.
So they're deliberately messing with our sense of place.
Yeah.
What's the purpose of that? What does it achieve?
Well, it reflects the character's own sense of displacement or confusion.
Oh, okay.
If the characters are feeling lost, the disorienting visuals can mirror their internal state.
Interesting.
It adds another layer of meaning to the film.
It's not just about setting the scene, it's about using the environment to reflect the character's psychological state.
Exactly.
You know, as we're talking about characters, one theme that keeps coming up is family dynamics.
Well, that's...
A lot of these films seem to use Haifa as a backdrop for exploring the complexities of family relationships.
Absolutely. Films like Broken Wings, Zion and His Brother, and Time was all delve into the intricacies of family life, the joys, the conflicts, the unspoken tensions. And often these stories feel very personal and authentic.
Right.
Drawing on the filmmaker's own experiences.
It's like they're saying, this is what family life looks like.
Yeah.
In all its messiness and beauty.
Yeah.
And Haifa becomes the stage where these personal dramas unfold.
And one recurring element that struck me is the absence of a father figure in many of these films.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
It's particularly noticeable in Broken Wings and Zion and His Brother.
And I wonder if that absence is meant to symbolize something deeper. Is it a commentary on the pressures faced by single mothers or the struggles of families on the margins?
It's definitely a valid interpretation. The absent father figure could be a metaphor for the challenges faced by families trying to navigate difficult circumstances.
Right.
It adds a layer of complexity and realism to the stories.
It makes you think about the different ways these films are reflecting the social realities of Israel, both past and present.
Precisely. They're not just telling individual stories, they're weaving together these personal narratives with larger societal issues, offering a glimpse into the human impact of these broader forces. And Haifa, with its diverse population and rich history, becomes the perfect canvas for exploring these multifaceted narratives.
Now, while we're on the topic of filmmaking, one thing that really struck me while going through your sources was the fact that Haifa itself is a hub for filmmaking in Israel.
It is.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Haifa has a thriving film scene, and organizations like the Haifa Arts Foundation play a crucial role in nurturing that ecosystem. They provide support for local filmmakers, promote Haifa as a cinematic destination, and help cultivate a unique cinematic identity for the city.
So it's not just about using Haifa as a backdrop. It's about fostering a whole creative community within the city itself. So it sounds like Haifa is really committed to showcasing its stories and talent.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about celebrating the city's unique culture and its potential as a cinematic hub.
Okay.
You know, speaking of stories and talent, I'm curious, what are the overarching messages these films convey?
That's a great question.
Yeah, like, are there common threads that tie them together?
We've talked a lot about the individual elements, but what's the bigger picture here?
Well, when we zoom out and consider the broader context, it becomes clear that Haifa on film is about so much more than just a location or a backdrop.
Yeah.
It's a canvas for exploring some of the most pressing social and cultural issues facing Israeli society. Take Time was, for example.
Okay.
The stark contrast between those affluent Carmel neighborhoods and the struggles of the lower city.
Right.
It really highlights the deep-seated social and economic divisions within Israel.
And Junction 48 doesn't shy away from those tensions either.
No, it doesn't.
It tackles those issues head-on, focusing on marginalized communities and giving voice to their struggles through the raw energy of hip-hop culture.
Right.
It's a powerful reminder that these social issues are not abstract concepts. They have real human consequences.
And remember how we discussed that recurring motif of the absent father figure?
Yeah.
That's not just a random plot device.
Right.
It's a reflection of the social and economic realities faced by many families in Israel.
Right.
These films weave together personal stories with larger societal issues, showing how these forces impact individual lives and relationships.
It's like they're saying, look, these problems exist, they're affecting real people, and we need to talk about them. But beyond those social tensions, I'm also sensing a theme of history and memory running through many of these films.
You're right. Films like Time Was and Broken Wings delve into the psychological impact of trauma and loss.
Yeah.
Both on a personal and a national level, they grapple with the weight of history and how it continues to shape individual lives and family relationships.
It's like they're acknowledging that the past isn't really past.
Right?
It lives on in the present, influencing who we are and how we see the world.
Yeah.
And tied into that theme of memory is this idea of identity.
Yes.
What does it mean to be Israeli in a place as diverse and historically complex as Haifa?
That's a question many of these films seem to be grappling with. Haifa, with its unique mix of cultures and histories, becomes this microcosm of the Israeli experience,
Right.
a place where different narratives intersect and collide. Filmmakers are drawn to that complexity, using it to explore the multifaceted nature of Israeli identity.
So it's not just about reflecting the present or re-examining the past.
Right.
It's also about envisioning the future. What kind of future do these films imagine for Haifa, and by extension for Israel?
That's a great point. While some films highlight the challenges and divisions within Israeli society,
Right.
others offer a glimmer of hope, a vision of a more inclusive and equitable future. Films like Going Up show individuals overcoming adversity and finding their place in the world, suggesting that positive change is possible.
It's a message of resilience and hope, even amidst all the complexities and challenges. It's like they're saying, yes, we have problems, but we can work through them. We can build a better future together.
And that brings us back to the idea of Haifa as a character, a city constantly evolving,
Yeah.
reflecting both the hopes and anxieties of Israeli society.
Through the lens of these films, we see Haifa not just as a place on a map, but as a living, breathing entity, a microcosm of the Israeli experience in all its messiness, beauty, and complexity.
It's a reminder that cities are more than just concrete and steel. They're living organisms, shaped by the people who inhabit them and the stories they tell. And Haifa's stories, as told through these films, offer a powerful and moving glimpse into the heart of what it means to be Israeli, to grapple with identity, memory, and hope.
It's an invitation to see ourselves reflected in the city's struggles and triumphs, to recognize the shared humanity that binds us together even amidst our differences. It leaves us with some thought-provoking questions. What stories haven't been told about Haifa yet? What unique aspects of the city could be explored in future films? Could Haifa itself be seen as a character in a broader ongoing narrative about Israel and its place in the world? These are questions worth pondering as we continue to explore the rich and ever-evolving world of Israeli cinema.